The flicker of a Denver kitchen light, a momentary hiccup in the electrical grid, should not possess the power to feel like a judgment. Yet when the icy, three-word text from my father, "I disown you," arrived, even the inanimate room seemed to register the seismic shift. 32 years of history, of carefully curated daughterhood, of financial life support, annihilated in a sentence that was less a threat and more a clinical execution of a relationship. The phone, still vibrating faintly in my hand from the text's arrival, settled into a sudden, deep silence, a silence far more profound than any shouting match could ever be. No justification, no agonizing buildup, simply an instantaneous exile, a complete severance delivered with a chilling, almost surgical precision. My immediate, unthinking reply was a single, steady word, "Okay." There were no tears, no desperate pleas, no reflexive scramble to undo the damage. Instead, a quiet, almost unsettling clarity descended. I placed the phone on the counter, the cool glass an anchor against the rising tide of adrenaline, opened my laptop, and made a decision so calm, so deliberate, it felt foreign. I would, with the precision of the auditor I was, dismantle the elaborate, 32-year structure of lies and exploitation they had built. This moment wasn't about revenge. It was about emancipation, the act of being set free, legally or socially, from an authority or control. It was a professional, procedural response to a profoundly personal betrayal. I had always believed the kitchen to be the unvarnished soul of a home, a place where the truth simmers beneath the surface. The one I grew up in back in Glendale, California, always bore the heavy scent of burnt coffee and Harold's low-grade stress. My father, Harold, was a connoisseur of control, lights kept perpetually dim, voices modulated to a whisper, emotions ruthlessly suppressed, silence maintained as a default setting. My stepmother, Marilyn, excelled at maintaining a facade. Everything on the surface was spotless, yet a quiet, venomous tension always simmered, to be in a state of suppressed anger or excitement, just beneath the pristine countertops. And then there was Evan, my older brother, who navigated that house with the entitled swagger of someone who owned every square inch, every narrative. My earliest life lesson was learning the complex choreography of taking up as little space as possible, a skill I honed to a high art. The common philosophical teaching that birth order inexorably shapes, influences the form or nature of one's identity, the eldest, the middle, the baby, may hold truth for some, but in our family, it was less about chronology and more about the assigned, unshakable roles. Evan was the undisputed golden child, the living, breathing proof that Harold had successfully raised a winner, a testament to his own imagined parental brilliance. I, conversely, was the designated scapegoat, a person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others, especially for reasons of expediency, the essential buffer. The functional cog whose sole purpose was to contain the family's inherent chaos. If Evan faltered, I was the one who quietly rectified, put right, correct, the mess. If a bill went unpaid, I became the emergency payer. If Harold's tightly wound voice suddenly escalated, the ultimate fault was, by some unspoken, cruel logic, always mine. Even my departure for college failed to provide the hoped-for detachment, the state of being objective or aloof. If anything, the distance merely amplified my utility, making me a more effective, guilt-free resource. I transitioned into the reliable daughter who regularly wired funds home, the one who was supposedly so responsible, having an obligation to do something, or having control over or care for someone, as part of one's job or role, that I could consistently patch the gaping, self-inflicted holes in their lives without complaint. The modern relevance here is profound. Learning English isn't just about vocabulary. It's about understanding the subtle power dynamics embedded in language, the difference between requesting help and demanding it through emotional manipulation. For years prior, the system had almost collapsed, leading to a truly unprecedented event. Harold called me, crying. In my entire memory, I had never witnessed such a raw, destabilizing display of emotion. He spoke of the house being mere days from foreclosure, the action of taking possession of a mortgaged property when the mortgager fails to keep up their mortgage payments, blaming an unnamed failure of Evan's and painting Marilyn as a victim consumed by worry. "You are my last hope, Bonnie," he had rasped, "the only child I can truly count on." Those words, a cocktail of guilt and manufactured praise, acted like an emotional shackle, a restraint or impediment, holding me hostage to a false narrative of duty. I agreed to help, but only, he assured me, just until he got back on his feet. I began by covering the monthly mortgage, then the utilities, and then a succession of small emergencies that possessed an uncanny ability to materialize precisely on my payday. I routinely rationalized, attempt to explain or justify behavior or an attitude with logical reasons, even if they are not appropriate, every single dollar as the necessary cost of keeping the peace, a quiet, often crippling toll. The irony, a state of affairs or an event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects and is often amusing as a result of my career as an auditor, was a constant, painful counterpoint. I could flawlessly balance the most complex financial ledgers for massive corporations, yet I utterly failed to find equilibrium in my own family's messy, emotionally charged accounts. Despite the pain, I persisted. Every holiday dinner transformed into a meticulously staged performance. Smiles were stretched too wide, questions were too pointed, and praise was reserved exclusively for Evan. Marilyn would enthusiastically extol, praise enthusiastically, his new job or his latest car, only to pivot to me with a soft, intensely patronizing, condescendingly superior smile and say, "Bonnie just likes working quietly." Nothing flashy. It was a dismissal dressed as a compliment, implying competence was merely a lack of ambition, a flaw. But a crucial shift occurred the week before the infamous text. Harold's demeanor grew sharp, cryptic, mysterious or obscure, suggesting he was concealing something significant. Evan developed an acute aversion to eye contact, and Marilyn was perpetually jittery, nervous or uneasy, flinching visibly at every notification that flashed on her phone screen. The deep cracks in their carefully constructed edifice were becoming impossible to ignore. And then, in the midst of a perfectly ordinary Denver evening, the truth was delivered not by them, but by an outsider, Uncle Robert. His message contained no text, no explanation, only an attached video. The thumbnail alone, my family gathered around the familiar oak dining table in Glendale, the one Evan had chipped and scarred with his initials at age 12, sent a strange, cold pull through my chest. I felt an inexplicable foreboding, a feeling that something bad is going to happen, even before I pressed play. The screen was slightly unsteady. Robert must have been filming casually, almost accidentally, his phone held loosely. The room was bathed in the harsh, unforgiving white light of Marilyn's elaborate overhead chandelier, illuminating every relaxed, happy, comfortable face, the absolute picture of people who believe themselves to be utterly secure, certain to remain safe and protected among their own. I hit play. Harold's voice, low, gravelly, and undeniably smug, was the first sound to cut through the silence. "She's not a daughter," he declared, the words dropping like stones. "She's a walking ATM." The room instantly erupted in laughter, real, unrestrained, room-filling laughter, the kind that signifies a shared, private, deeply satisfying joke. I froze, the blood retreating from my face. Marilyn leaned forward, shaking her head in a mock scold, yet her smile was wide, betraying the amusement. "Harold, stop," she laughed. "That girl works too hard for her own good. Let her feel useful." Evan, his tone light, almost languid, slow and relaxed, chimed in, "Honestly, Dad, she's pathetic. You should hear how she talks at work, always trying to justify why she sends you money. It's embarrassing." The laughter swelled again, and I could hear Robert's distinct snort behind the camera. My stomach twisted into a painful knot, yet I couldn't stop the audio from playing, pulling me relentlessly into a truth I had spent years of my life meticulously denying, stating that one refuses to admit the truth or existence of. Harold lifted his beer toward the camera, a sickening gesture of a toast. "To my personal ATM," he said. "Long may she pay." The clinking of glasses, a whistle, a chorus of cheers. The sheer, casual cruelty, The absolute certainty that I would never be privy to this moment, that I was too desperate for their fragile, manufactured love to ever truly walk away, rendered my hand numb. I pressed pause. The air around me felt suddenly frigid, and for the very first time in my life, the dominant emotion wasn't sadness or pain. It was awakening. The philosophical lesson here is drawn from the historical concept of the Gilded Age in America, where surface brilliance masked core corruption. My family's outward respectability was merely a thin veneer over profound financial and emotional exploitation. How do we distinguish between genuine love and transactional dependency when the language used is deliberately obscured? The quiet aftermath of betrayal is a unique, unsettling phenomenon. It lacks the expected, cathartic violence of screaming or a dramatic collapse. Instead, there is a silence so profound, so clinically clean, that it seems to reverberate, to echo or ring with sound off the walls. This was the quality of the silence in my Denver apartment the moment I typed the single, decisive word, okay. Throughout my childhood, silence had always been weaponized, a powerful tool of punishment designed to force immediate submission. But here, now, in my own space, this silence felt utterly different. It felt like sovereignty, supreme and independent authority over a territory. It was the sound of control being unequivocally reclaimed. The first act of this reclamation involved my laptop. If Harold had chosen to sever the relationship through the legal formalities of his lawyer, I would meet him on his preferred battleground, armed with distance, clarity, and a formal severing, the action of cutting something off, that he would never be able to dismiss as a simple tantrum. The first digital tab I opened was my banking portal. The familiar blue and white dashboard loaded with a quiet hum that resonated with the newfound, intense calm in my chest. As the numbers populated the screen, my professional training, my auditor's mindset, the established set of attitudes held by someone, instantly took over, pushing the emotional component aside. This was no longer about family. It was about procedure, about a financial ledger that required correcting. Step 1. Mortgage support. The figures were stark. For years, 48 consecutive, on-time payments, meticulously recorded. I hovered over the automatic transfer, my name clearly listed as the sole payer, and clicked cancel. A small confirmation box, the digital equivalent of a solemn oath, popped up. Are you sure? I released a slow, measured breath. Yes, I whispered into the empty room. Step 2. Utilities. I had, for years, silently absorbed the cost of their Glendale life, electricity, water, even the internet when Harold forgot the bill. Click, click, click. Every service transfer was discontinued, stopped. Step 3. Additional support payments. This encompassed the emergency fund Marilyn would periodically, and often vaguely, message me about, and the periodic, unexplained payments Evan perpetually needed. The cumulative sum of these small extortions, the practice of obtaining something, especially money, through force or threats, amounted to thousands. All stopped. Step 4, and critically important, documentation. Since Harold insisted on a war fought with paperwork, I would prove myself fluent in that language. I opened a blank document, giving it the utterly neutral title, Payments. No emotional drama, no commentary, only cold, hard data, numbers, dates, amounts, and precise descriptions. The document grew rapidly, filling line by line with 4 years of profound financial sacrifice, the act of giving up something valued for the sake of something else regarded as more important, a ledger of my unacknowledged self-denial. Reviewing it was like staring at an X-ray of a severe, untreated bone fracture. My phone began to buzz with a new intensity. A message arrived from Evan. You better not be being dramatic right now. I refused to open it. Another buzz, this time from Marilyn. The mortgage is due tomorrow. Don't make this harder. I hit delete. Delete. They were operating under a fundamental, fatal assumption that I was merely throwing a theatrical tantrum, that everything would inevitably revert, return to a previous state, to the familiar status quo once I calmed down. But I was not angry, nor was I spiraling, descending to a lower or worse state, losing control. I was finished. The following morning, I woke with a jolt of unfamiliar lightness. The apartment seemed physically brighter, the air scrubbed clean. I prepared my coffee, secured my hair into a neat, professional ponytail, and sat down at the table. Out of a sheer, ingrained professional habit, I logged back into their mortgage portal. The screen was brutally clear. A small red banner, blinking across the top, declared, "Payment failed. Account past due." My heart did not pound. I did not experience a surge of panic. Instead, I felt a deep, almost profound sense of relief. It was the first visible crack in the entire, precarious structure they had erected entirely on my shoulders. By afternoon, the ripple effects were undeniable. My inbox was suddenly flooded with emails from every service tied to my financial support. Unsuccessful. Card declined. Account inactive. Each notification felt like a single, taut string snapping loose from my spine, releasing an untold weight. Around 5 p.m., Evan called. I watched his name glow on the screen, a beacon of pure entitlement, the fact of having a right to something, and let it ring until it gave up. 10 seconds later, the voicemail notification appeared. This isn't funny. I deleted it without listening. That night, I returned to my balcony, observing Denver's sprawling, illuminated skyline. The distant hum of traffic provided a low, ambient soundtrack. The cold wind was a gentle caress on my cheek. For the first time since my childhood, I felt a genuine, undeniable sense of ownership over my life. This wasn't a feeling of pride or victory. It was agency, the capacity of individuals to act independently and to make their own free choices. I was not engaged in sabotage. I was performing a necessary, professional extraction of myself from a financial structure explicitly built on my personal exploitation. As I inhaled the cold, sharp air, a crucial philosophical realization settled over me, as cold and certain as frost on steel. Harold believed that disowning, denying any responsibility for or connection with, me would render me weak and supplicant. He had, however, forgotten a truth of profound financial and emotional physics. I was the foundation. I was the one holding the entire, failing structure together. And now I was holding nothing at all. This modern-day story is a vivid example of the idiom, cutting the apron strings, but applied to financial independence and emotional maturity, rather than simply leaving home. It's about understanding that the strongest word in English, sometimes, is the quietest one. What is the true measure of support in a relationship? The resources provided or the respect exchanged? The shift from the slow burn of uncertainty to a full, chaotic explosion occurred precisely 48 hours later. The screen of my phone lit up with a call from Marilyn, vibrating so violently on the counter it seemed to express her rising panic. I didn't immediately move. I finished slowly pouring my coffee, inhaling the steadying steam, creating a deliberate pause before answering. When I finally accepted the call, I placed it on speaker, allowing her siren-like voice to fill the room. "Bonnie, what did you do?" Her voice was shrill, accusatory. "The mortgage payment bounced. The bank called your father. They said it was rejected. It's due today. Do you understand that? Fix it. Fix it right now." It was not a question, nor was it a sign of concern. It was a pure, unadulterated demand, an insistent and peremptory request. I took a slow, measured sip of my coffee, savoring the moment of absolute control. "Harold asked me to direct everything through his lawyer," I replied, my tone even and clinical. "So that's precisely what I'm doing." The line went instantly silent, followed by a sharp, audible intake of breath. "What lawyer?" she practically screamed. "Don't play games, Bonnie. You're being unreasonable." I simply ended the call. 10 seconds later, the phone began to ring again and again, followed by a barrage of text messages, an aggressive blend of emotional guilt, outright accusation, and rising desperation. Evan joined the fray, his text messaging aggressive and loaded. "Are you out of your mind? You're ruining Dad's life. Get that payment through today." A follow-up text was even more personal. "You think being dramatic makes you powerful? You're pathetic." For years, these precise words would have gutted, emotionally devastated me, sending me spiraling into self-doubt and frantic compliance. Now, however, they felt remarkably small, almost like the buzzing of a trapped fly. By noon, the level of the calls had escalated from mere frantic to explicitly threatening. Marilyn claimed they would initiate legal action for financial harassment. Evan declared I would be cut off forever, an empty threat considering the new reality. Harold, by contrast, remained silent, not a single line of text or a phone call, and his silence was, in a way, far more powerful than their collective chaos. But later that same afternoon, the situation critically shifted. My lawyer called. She had received a message from Harold's supposed legal representative, a stiff, poorly written email accusing me of financial harassment and demanding I immediately restore all payments. My lawyer laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "This isn't a real claim, Bonnie," she said. "It's pressure. Empty pressure." "Good," I replied, a wave of profound relief washing over me. "Because I need your help with something else entirely." I proceeded to lay out the full, complex narrative, the 4 years of financial payments, the accidental video from Uncle Robert proving their malicious intent, and the systematic way they had used me as an exclusive bank account. Then I voiced the suspicion I had only recently allowed myself to form. There were always small discrepancies, a lack of compatibility or similarity between 2 or more facts in his community fund reports. I believe Harold might be seriously mismanaging funds. Perhaps worse. My lawyer's voice grew instantly still and serious. "Then we start digging," she stated. The following week became a quiet, intense, after-hours investigation. I meticulously worked through my professional audit notes, cross-checking the suspicious dates and large transactions against the publicly available filings of the community fund Harold managed. The more we compared, the more undeniable the cracks became. My lawyer brought in trusted financial contacts, and soon, a dark pattern emerged, confirming my worst fears. Harold wasn't merely sloppy, careless, and untidy. He was actively siphoning, drawing off or conveying liquid by means of a siphon, significant, repeated amounts of money, disguising the withdrawals under deliberately vague descriptions. The unraveling, the process of becoming undone or disorganized, didn't stop there. One night, close to 11 p.m., an unrecognized number buzzed on my phone. I hesitated, almost ignoring it, but a deep, instinctive feeling told me to answer. A soft, trembling voice whispered, "Bonnie, it's Mia, your cousin." She sounded terrified, like she was hiding somewhere. "I saw the video," she confessed. "And I need to tell you what happened to me." My breath hitched painfully. She told me everything, how Harold had once cornered her when she was a vulnerable 17, her desperate scream, and how her own mother had tragically dismissed the entire episode as a misunderstanding. She had been forcibly silenced, carrying the secret and the guilt for years. "I'm so sorry," Mia whispered, breaking down. I didn't know who else I could tell. I closed my eyes, the edges of my vision tightening in a wave of cold fury. Harold was not merely a manipulative or financially abusive figure. He was dangerous. The final, crippling blow came just 2 days later, delivered by an unexpected ally, Dana, my mother's lifelong best friend. Her voice was thick with deep, uncontrolled emotion. "Your mother suffered, Bonnie," Dana revealed. "She never told you how truly bad it was because she desperately wanted to shield, protect someone or something from a danger, risk, or unpleasant experience. You." Harold controlled everything, her money, her choices, her friendships. He drained, caused the complete removal of her, piece by piece. Something old and deep inside me, the core belief that my mother's unhappiness was somehow my fault, splintered forever. This was not a garden-variety dysfunctional family. It was a carefully constructed system, a fiefdom built entirely on one man's absolute control and entitlement. And I was not merely the next victim in line. I was the one who was now actively, irrevocably, breaking the destructive pattern. This entire sequence is a powerful demonstration of the idiom, "A leopard cannot change its spots," signifying that a person's character or nature, especially if it is negative, will remain the same. The historical echo here is to the concept of tyranny, absolute power applied in a small, domestic sphere. When does the obligation to family end and the obligation to justice and self-preservation begin? The ultimate confrontation, the scene that marked the decisive end of an era, arrived on a quiet Thursday evening. The sun was setting over Denver, its light streaming through my apartment window and casting long, rich, golden shadows across the room. The moment someone started pounding on my door, 3 heavy, frantic knocks, I knew instantly who it was. When I opened the door, Harold stood there, a shadow of his former self. His face was a pale, sickening gray, sunken and deeply etched by profound panic. The arrogant, confident posture he had always wielded like an impenetrable weapon was entirely gone. "Bonnie," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, they're talking about legal action. The fund people are accusing me. There are rumors everywhere. Fix this. You can fix this. You're the auditor. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." His voice cracked painfully on the last word, and then, in a desperate, final attempt at emotional manipulation, he added, "You're my daughter," almost begging. I allowed the silence to stretch and fully occupy the hallway, watching him visibly shift, change in position or direction, with discomfort, watching the panic rise in his eyes. Then, without a word, I reached into the folder I held and handed him a single, immaculately prepared sheet of paper. His hands, the hands that had once delivered the icy text of my disinheritance, the act of preventing an heir from succeeding to property, trembled violently as he read. When his eyes fell upon the detailed list of flagged transactions and the concise summary of potential financial misconduct, his breath hitched, caught in his throat, in a sickening gasp. "What?" he choked out. "What is this?" "A summary," I said quietly, my voice utterly devoid of emotion, "of what the investigators already know. And what more people will know very soon." He looked up, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "You did this," he accused, the statement not a question, but an act of reflexive blame. "No," I corrected him softly. "You did." He shook his head desperately, his voice suddenly rising in volume and pitch. "Bonnie, please. I need your help. You owe me." I took a single, deliberate step back, letting the cold, clean hallway light cut the physical distance between us. "I don't owe you anything," I stated, the words final. "And you disowned me. Remember?" His face crumpled completely. "I didn't mean that." He managed, a broken whimper. "That's the problem," I concluded, holding his gaze steadily. "You never do." I closed the door smoothly, gently, before he could manage another word. The latch clicked softly into place, a quiet, final sound that nonetheless felt as loud as a gunshot. Behind the solid wood, I heard Harold's sharp, broken gasp, a single, soundless exhalation that felt like the precise moment his entire world, the false edifice he had maintained for decades, finally collapsed. It collapsed not because I had actively destroyed, ruined, or spoilt anything, but because I had, at long last, stopped holding it up. The essential philosophical teaching here is based on the idea of moral inertia, where people continue in a harmful pattern until an external force, in this case, my decision to stop paying, forces a complete system failure. This event is the embodiment of the English idiom, "The chickens have come home to roost," meaning past mistakes or misdeeds are now coming back to cause trouble. What fundamental lies do we tell ourselves to maintain a painful status quo, and what catalyst is required to shatter them? The fallout, the adverse results of a situation or action from that final moment of closure was swift and comprehensive, moving even faster than I had professionally anticipated. Within one short week, the Community Fund Board, reacting to the rapidly circulating rumors and the visible distress of their treasurer, launched a formal internal review. My lawyer, acting with quiet, surgical speed, immediately forwarded the detailed summary of discrepancies I had prepared, and from that point forward, the structure of Harold's life began to unravel, to become undone or disorganized, with accelerating speed. Meetings were hastily convened, detailed statements were formally requested, and the quiet, professional questions rapidly transformed into open, undeniable accusations. Harold's name, which had once been pronounced with automatic, unquestioning respect within his community, quickly morphed into a cautionary warning, an object of public scandal, an action or event regarded as morally or legally wrong and causing general public outrage. Evan attempted a weak, frantic digital defense of his father online, but his emotional posts only served to draw more attention to the burgeoning investigation. Screenshots of his past entitled behavior circulated widely. People openly questioned his motivations and financial status, and his own reputation fractured under the crushing weight of his inherent entitlement, the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment. By the end of the month, the house in Glendale, Harold's ultimate symbol of pride, but for me, a crushing financial burden, was officially placed under an accelerated foreclosure review. The mortgage payments I had carried entirely alone for 4 long years had been the only fragile thread keeping the property's life support going. Without my support, the system collapsed almost instantaneously, without any perceptible duration of time. Meanwhile, my own life in Denver underwent a quiet, profound metamorphosis, a change of the form or nature of a thing or person into a completely different one that I had never actively sought. My boss, a senior partner in the auditing firm, pulled me aside after a particularly complex project. She offered me a significant promotion, citing my ability to handle immense personal pressure with unwavering clarity, the quality of being easy to understand or precise. I walked out of her office with a new title, a new compensation package, and a professional standing that finally, truly reflected the immense work and intellectual rigor I had been quietly deploying all along. One crisp evening, standing on my balcony, gazing out over the glittering city lights, a quiet, deep truth finally settled in my soul. For the first time, genuine, sustainable peace was not an expense. It wasn't something I had to financially subsidize, support financially, or manipulate others to achieve. It was the natural, free of charge state of my new life. In the end, the core wisdom I gained was simple, yet foundational. Family isn't defined by the mere accident of blood, but by the tangible quality of how you are treated, the respect you are afforded, and the reciprocity of the bond. The action of walking away, of deliberately separating myself from the people who were systematically draining my finances, my energy, and my self-worth, was not a selfish act of cruelty. It was, at its very core, an absolute act of survival, the state or fact of continuing to live or exist. The act of setting firm, non-negotiable boundaries was not the imposition of cruelty on them. It was the ultimate granting of freedom to myself. This journey is a testament to the powerful idiom, new beginnings, a fresh start born from the wreckage of a collapsed past, and the profound modern relevance lies in recognizing and valuing one's own labor and emotional health. If you have ever felt the soul-crushing weight of carrying more than your fair share, or if you have ever been silently expected to hold a collapsing system together entirely alone, understand this: you are not wrong for finally, decisively putting that burden down.